Yes, and they paid the price in something else that was commonplace for the time. It cost them the entire American Southwest. Should America collect reparations from Al Sharpton for the shipping cost of bringing his ancestors here? Do we debit from the ledger of reparations the cost of room and board of all those slaves for more than 300 years? Do we send that bill to Black Lives Matter, the NAACP? Will Maxine Waters or Jesse Jackson pay their fair share of that tab? If Mad Max's ancestors had not been brought here, might she be living in a grass hut in Africa instead of a $6 million mansion that isn't even in the district she represents? Keep going down that rabbit trail, and we could get really ridiculous. Let's point out, too, that not all slaves were treated badly or had scars on their backs from the overseer's lash. Andrew Jackson had a slave called Uncle Alfred who died at about the age of 98 and is buried in the Jackson family cemetery only a few feet from the resting place of the former President of the United States and his wife. So, Americans of African ethnicity need to tell Democrats to stop using them as an excuse for their own selfish, nefarious, leftist, Marxist political gain, and let history be as it was. Let's revisit the inarguable fact that globalists want a one-world government and cannot achieve it with a strong America in their way, especially as long as Americans have strong patriotic, familial, and religious views, and can see through Marxist socialism like it was cellophane wrapped around a convenience store burrito. Ergo the effort of cancel culturists trying to chip away at our very foundations by attacking our fundamental, cultural, and traditional values. Remember what Brock Chisholm said about traditions? This could be the reason the left went ballistic when Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016 and got in their way. They had to put their thumb on the scales and come up with a backup plan to keep him from getting re-elected in 2020 and stifling their efforts for another 4 years. They're still at it with all the spurious criminal charges they've levied against the former president. Was the 2020 election theft also part of the insurance policy mentioned by former FBI boss Peter Strzok, mentioned in his emails to his paramour, Lisa Page? That made a lot of news a while back. Maybe because the goal of these leftist conspirators was to remove Trump. They started 4 years earlier to set up the plan to prevent his re-election, and the election we wound up with was a pretty elaborate and well-organized fraud no matter what they say on CNN. Unless the American people can be convinced that this country is not worth defending. And the left is working feverishly in our education system to do just that. The globalists will never be able to persuade us to give up our national sovereignty, per Chisholm's suggestion, and subordinate to a one-world government. With some world leaders like German Chancellor Angela Merkel and even Barack Obama having suggested the surrender of national sovereignty, are we already living the end times prediction? Perhaps. Let's also add Robert Jeffress, senior pastor of First Baptist Church of Dallas, to the list of people prophesying and saying the book of Revelation talks about a single world government ruled by the Antichrist coming in the last days. It does not go unnoticed, too, that rather recently former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown has used the coronavirus pandemic as justification to form a temporary one-world government to deal with a worldwide problem. If this is done, doing it again or doing it more extensively may become a lot easier and more palatable to Westerners depending on how much we let them get away with. So, beware, folks. It's been said there is nothing more permanent than a temporary government plan. Here's an interesting if not chilling sidebar. The World Health Organization recently held a meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, calling it the World Health Assembly that has a lot of people buzzing about its intent to grab a dangerous amount of power. They passed 300 amendments to the international health regulations, all of which seems to have been aimed at getting increased control over the entire world through a healthcare system. At this assembly, attended by virtually every recognized country in the world, including John Kerry, Biden's so-called climate czar, Far less was discussed about health as much as making changes to rules that would mean the World Health Organization would hold sway over sovereign nations and be headquartered in Geneva, across the lake from Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum. By the way, Michelle Bachmann says not one single member of Congress attended this assembly. Hence, it went virtually unnoticed by our political leaders, and yet it could be a precursor to world government. Now to Chisholm's comments about family tradition. Is that why the LGBT goal sought to destroy God's design for traditional marriage? Such a thing does involve both family, tradition, and an ending with what God has joined together. Let no man put asunder. The tradition comes from thousands of years of practicing God's intent, design, and mandate. The family part comes by way of the same plan. Whereas, family cannot be created by a corruption of marriage to incorporate same-sex couples. Is that why Satan's thumb is in God's eye, since the Bible records God saying, "Be fruitful and multiply"? Gay couples can't multiply. Tab A doesn't fit another tab A, and slot A doesn't fit another slot A. As to Chisholm's suggestion about national patriotism, are leftists also not organizing and sponsoring elaborate efforts to destroy that by twisting our history in schools, tearing down historic monuments, convincing young voters that America is a horrible place and white people are the reason? Capitalism is a weapon to support the rich and punish the poor, although there are plenty of billionaires in the Democrat camp, and they didn't make their money with a cardboard sign on a roadside corner. Socialism is the answer to all questions, and what we all just need to do is cancel our own culture. Is this why the left hated Donald Trump so vehemently, because of his patriotism and nationalistic America First policies? That seems pretty likely. And, finally, Chisholm suggests we erase from the minds of men all religious dogmas, principles. While visiting Canterbury, England, a few years ago, I saw a commercial shop that was built hundreds of years ago, which my tour guide told me used to be a private residence where people met in the basement to pray in secret after King Henry VIII forced his subjects to abandon the Catholic Church that was extant in England for 1,000 years and join his Church of England. Is this where the left is trying to take America? How long will it be before Americans will have to pray secretly in a basement for fear of government reprisal, all because a 19th century Prussian idiot who couldn't make a living and thought religion was the opiate of the people, and that people who had money should give it to him? If you don't think it could happen in America, the way is already being paved by dozens of members of Congress who are members of or financed by Democrat Socialists of America, and a president whose sole interest is selling out our country for money as a fee for service from our arch enemies, China, Russia, and others, which seems to be at the core of many of America's problems. Peeling back a few layers, we find more concerning the war on America's religious conservatives.